They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But what if you're not in it? I was sitting on the back porch that morning, a warm mug between my hands, when the photo came through. Group text. Best weekend ever, it read, followed by a flurry of hearts and firework emojis. My fingers trembled as I tapped the image open. There they were, Daniel, his wife, the twins, even cousin Meredith who flew in late Friday night. All of them grinning beneath the pine trees, the golden cabin glowing behind them like something out of a holiday card. A perfect family photo. Perfect except for one thing. I wasn't in it. Not behind them, not to the side. Not even blurred in the background. Just gone. Like I hadn't spent weeks planning the trip. Like I hadn't cooked 3 meals a day. Like I wasn't the one who booked the cabin, paid the deposit, and packed emergency ponchos just in case it rained. No one noticed I wasn't there. Not even me at first. I stared at that photo longer than I should have, hoping I'd spot my elbow. A shadow. Something. Anything. But I was nowhere. I remembered the moment they must have taken it. I'd been in the kitchen slicing watermelon for the kids. I could hear them laughing outside, voices drifting through the screen door. Someone called out, "Let's get a quick photo before the light changes." And that was it. No one called for me. No one said, "Wait, where's Mom?" Not even Daniel. I had smiled through the whole weekend, hugged everyone, tucked the twins in when they got fussy. I even cleaned the grill before we left, scraping off someone else's burnt corn on the cob. But when the camera clicked, I wasn't in the frame. And the worst part? No one noticed. I kept looking at that photo, not out of anger but out of something quieter, something sadder, like the kind of silence that follows after a room empties, and you're still standing there with a plate in your hand, not sure when the music stopped. I don't think they meant to leave me out. I don't think anyone said, "Let's make sure she's not in it." It wasn't cruel in the deliberate way. It was the kind of forgetting that comes when people have stopped looking at you altogether. When you've become part of the background noise, the one who refills the ice, who folds the blankets, who makes the toast just the way they like it without ever being asked. That kind of forgetting doesn't scream. It whispers. And I've been listening to that whisper for years. It started small. Thank you notes that didn't mention my name. Group photos where I was the one holding the camera. Birthday dinners where I brought the cake, paid the check, and still walked to the car alone. It wasn't just this one photo. It was the pattern. This weekend just made it impossible to unsee. I remember Friday afternoon, arriving at the cabin with the back of my car packed tight. I had triple-checked the list. Bedding, paper towels, allergy meds for Henry, veggie patties for Meredith, backup batteries for the lanterns. I carried bag after bag inside while everyone else took turns exclaiming how perfect the view was. No one offered to help me unload. No one asked if I needed a break. And I didn't ask them to. That's the part one keeps circling back to. I didn't say a word. I smiled. I nodded. I pulled my sweater tighter when the breeze picked up and said, "Isn't this lovely?" Like I wasn't already exhausted before the first meal had even been served. I spent that first night cleaning the downstairs bathroom because someone forgot to flush, and the scent lingered like a challenge. Saturday morning I was up before the sun, baking cinnamon rolls from scratch. My mother's recipe. Daniel used to love them as a boy. He didn't say anything when he bit into one, just scrolled on his phone and said, "These are warm," like it was a statement of fact, not a memory being handed to him. I wanted to believe I was doing it for the love, that I was the kind of woman who gave without expecting. But I did expect something. Not applause. Not a parade. Just presence. Just for someone to say, "I see you." Instead I got silence. The kind that settles over your shoulders like dust. You don't notice it at first, but eventually it dulls your edges. Makes you forget you were once someone bright. It wasn't always like this. There was a time Daniel would crawl into my lap after nightmares and whisper, "Don't leave me." A time he drew a picture of me in his first grade class, me with a crown holding a spatula. "Queen of pancakes," he had written, backwards R and all. I used to tape it to the fridge like a badge of honor. I kept every crayon drawing, every Mother's Day card, every note scribbled on lined paper with words like, "Best mom ever." And now I was the woman who stood in the kitchen slicing watermelon while her family took a photo without her. I didn't say anything that afternoon. I just quietly cleaned up, folded the picnic blanket, wrapped up leftover potato salad, put the sodas back in the cooler and took the trash to the bin. Even though the bag was leaking and it soaked through my shoes, no one offered to carry it. No one even looked up. That night, I stood in the cabin kitchen rinsing dishes while voices laughed in the living room. I stared at my reflection in the window above the sink. The lights inside made it sharp, too sharp. Every line on my face, every gray strand. I looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Daniel walked in at one point, grabbed a beer from the fridge and said, "You're a trooper, Mom." Trooper. Like I'd survived a war. Maybe I had. The next morning they packed up in a rush. No one wanted to miss the drive home before traffic. Someone broke a mug. No one cleaned it. I was left to check drawers, remake beds, scrub counters. I vacuumed crumbs from under the dining table. Someone's child had spilled crackers and no one had noticed. Or maybe they had and figured I'd get to it. I always do. When the last car pulled away, I stood on the porch. The cabin was quiet now. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and for a moment, I let it touch my face. There was no applause, no closing speech, no group hug, just me, and the silence. Back home I unpacked slowly. The fridge still had the salad dressing I brought. My laundry basket was full. My back ached from too many trips up and down the stairs. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my phone. The group photo was still there. No caption update, no follow-up message. Just that one photo, and I still wasn't in it. I went to the kitchen, pulled out the wine I'd been saving since last Christmas, and poured myself a glass. No one to offer me a toast, so I made my own. "To the woman who made it happen," I whispered. "To the hands that held it all together while no one looked." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a selfie. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I wanted to remember this feeling. This ache. This clarity. I printed that photo. Just me holding the wine glass in my messy kitchen. Hair pulled back, eyes tired but alive. I taped it next to the group photo. Not for them. For me. Because I was there. Even if they didn't see me, I was there. And I wasn't going to let them erase me anymore. I didn't expect anything to change. Not after the photo. Not after the silence. Not even after the toast I gave myself in that quiet kitchen. But something inside me had shifted, subtle like a hairline crack in porcelain. You don't see it at first. Then one day the light catches it just right, and suddenly the whole shape of you feels different. That's what it felt like when I opened the group chat the next morning and saw the newest message. "We should make this a yearly tradition. Same weekend next year." Someone added heart emojis. Someone else dropped a picnic basket gif. Daniel replied, "Count us in." I stared at those words. Count us in. Not once had he texted me after the trip. Not a single, "Thanks for hosting." Or "That was great, Mom." But now he was jumping into a conversation about doing it again. Like nothing had happened, like I wasn't still rinsing crumbs out of my travel cooler, and nursing the bruises on my hands from dragging a leaking trash bag down the cabin steps. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence I gave them now, it wasn't weakness. It was choice. The next few days were filled with the small rituals of returning home, washing linens, emptying coolers, cleaning the car. But something had changed in how I did them. I wasn't moving on autopilot anymore. I was watching myself. There I was, folding dish towels like I had 100 times before. Only this time, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. And I said out loud, "I don't want to do this again." Not just the trip. The whole pattern. Not being the one who drives 5 hours with her trunk full of supplies no one notices. Not being the one who remembers birthdays, brings thoughtful gifts, and stands in the background while everyone else opens theirs. Not being the one who gets left out of the photo, then told it wasn't on purpose because somehow that's supposed to make it feel better. I didn't want to be the woman people remembered only when they needed logistics handled. I didn't want to be useful. I wanted to be loved. And those aren't the same thing. That weekend, I cleared out a drawer in my bedroom. It was full of old wrapping paper, tape, and birthday cards I'd bought on sale just in case. I kept one. A card that said, "You are seen. You are loved. You matter." I had bought it for someone else once. Never sent it. I wrote my own name on the envelope. Then I placed it on my nightstand. I started noticing other things too. How many times I said yes when I didn't want to. How often I apologized for things that weren't my fault. How small I'd made myself so other people could feel comfortable. The next week, I canceled brunch with a neighbor who never let me speak more than 5 sentences without turning the conversation back to her dog. I stopped replying to group chats that made me feel like a background character. I bought a new blouse. Not because anyone was coming over, but because I liked the color. Deep green. The kind that made my eyes look like they remembered something about themselves. I didn't call Daniel, and he didn't call me. First, that stung. But then I realized I didn't want to talk to someone who only noticed my silence. I wanted someone who saw my presence. That Sunday, I walked into the local bookstore. There's a little cafe tucked in the back where I used to go years ago, before things got busy, before life was measured in carpools and casseroles. I ordered a chai latte, sat by the window, pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not to anyone, just for me. Not a grocery list. Not reminders. Just thoughts, feelings, fragments of myself I hadn't spoken to in years. A young woman at the next table smiled at me. "Excuse me," she said. "I love your sweater. That green is beautiful on you." I thanked her. Not in the polite automatic way, but in the way that said, "I received that." I let it land, because I was learning finally how to let things land. Love, kindness, even the sting of being forgotten, because sometimes that pain is a teacher. And mine had taught me this. If you keep waiting to be invited into the photo, you'll spend your life outside the frame. Sometimes you have to walk in, stand still, and say click. The moment I walked back into my own life, everything looked unfamiliar. Not because it had changed, but because I had. It started with the fridge. I opened it one afternoon, searching for something easy, something comforting. And there they were. Daniel's favorite condiments. The grape jelly only he eats. The hot sauce I keep because his wife Emily likes it with eggs. A bottle of almond milk for Meredith, even though she only visits twice a year. I stood there, hand on the fridge door, cold air curling around my fingers, and realized none of it was for me. Not the fridge. Not the calendar cluttered with birthdays and reminders. Not the shelf full of board games no one plays anymore. It was a shrine to being useful, so I cleared it out. I tossed the jelly, the hot sauce, the almond milk. I rearranged the shelves, bought things I liked. Kalamata olives, goat cheese, a bottle of white wine that didn't have to be approved by anyone's palate. I stood there, fridge humming softly, and felt something loosen in my chest. "This is mine," I whispered. "This is for me." The next day I opened the kitchen cabinet, the one full of mismatched mugs. Half of them were from school fundraisers, workplaces I'd left a decade ago, or novelty cups that had long lost their charm. I picked one I'd never used, a smooth ceramic one with a faded daisy on it. I poured myself tea and sat by the window, and I thought, what if I invited people into my life who see me, really see me? Not because I host, not because I serve, but because I exist. So I made a list. Not a grocery list, not a guest list, a heart list. People who, in quiet moments, made me feel like more, not less. There was Carol, my coworker from the ER, who once stayed an extra hour after her shift to help me clean up a spill and then asked, "Are you really okay?" There was Nadine from the used bookstore, who always remembers what kind of poetry I like and sets things aside for me. There was Diane, my cousin, not the one who took photos without me, but the one who sent me soup when I had the flu last winter and wrote, "No pressure to reply. Just rest." I texted them. No group chat. No forced invitation. Just a simple message. "I'm hosting dinner next Sunday. Nothing fancy. Just good food and maybe a little wine. I'd love for you to come." Every one of them said yes. I didn't plan a theme. I didn't obsess over table settings. I bought fresh flowers because I wanted them on the table, not because I expected compliments. I made roasted vegetables with thyme and sea salt, a salad with real feta, not the kind that comes in plastic tubs. I played jazz music, soft, steady. I set the table with cloth napkins I hadn't used in years. I lit candles, not to impress, just because I liked the glow. When they arrived, no one asked what they could bring. No one waited to be served. They stepped into my kitchen like they belonged there, not as guests but as equals. We laughed. We told stories. Carol admitted she once faked a headache to avoid a bad date. Nadine confessed she's terrified of elevators, but pretends she's not because her apartment is on the 10th floor. We passed dishes around like communion, like memory, like a shared understanding that we'd all been small at someone's table before. And tonight we weren't. At some point Diane raised a glass. "To Margaret," she said, smiling across the flicker of candlelight, "for choosing herself. And for setting one hell of a table." Everyone clinked glasses. And me? I looked around that table, at the faces glowing in warm light, at the chairs I picked, the food I cooked not out of obligation but joy, and I felt it. Presence. I wasn't waiting in the kitchen. I wasn't behind the camera. I was here. Not just invited. Included. Seen. After they left, I didn't clean in a rush. I didn't check my phone for missed messages. I stood in my kitchen barefoot, candles still flickering, and let the quiet settle over me like a warm blanket instead of a void. This time the silence didn't ache. It soothed, because this wasn't absence. This was fullness. It had been 11 days. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a "did you make it home okay?" from Daniel. And then one Thursday afternoon the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, halfway through kneading dough for a lemon rosemary focaccia. I froze. Not from fear, but from something older, something colder, familiar and worn, like a habit I no longer wore but still remembered how to put on. I wiped my hands on a towel and moved slowly toward the door. The silhouette on the other side was unmistakable. Broad shoulders, baseball cap, hands in his pockets. Daniel. I opened the door. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but energetically. Like he had shrunk beneath something heavy he couldn't name. "Hi, Mom," he said. Voice careful. Not tender. Not angry. Just cautious. Like someone approaching a wild animal that used to know them. I didn't smile. I didn't say hi back. I simply stepped aside and let him in. The house was warm. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floors. The scent of rosemary hung in the air. Soft music played low in the background. Everything was calm. Intentional. Everything was mine. He stood just inside the doorway, scanning the room. The photos had changed. The old family pictures were gone. In their place were landscapes, pressed flowers, a new portrait of me sitting in my garden, smiling, real, unfiltered. "I wasn't sure you'd answer," he said finally. "I almost didn't," I replied. He nodded, as if he expected that. Then gently he placed something on the table. A small envelope. My name written on it. His handwriting. Neat but unfamiliar now. Like it belonged to someone else. "I wrote it on the drive here," he said. I didn't open it. Instead, I walked to the counter, lifted the towel off the dough and began kneading again. My silence wasn't passive. It was a choice. A boundary. A shape I was learning to hold. He shifted in place. Waited. Then finally spoke again. "I saw the photo," he said. I didn't answer. He continued. "It took me a few days to realize. I kept looking at it. Everyone looked so happy. So full. But something felt off. I pressed the dough harder. I was outside," I said, voice even. I heard the laughter. The camera clicks. But no one came to get me. Not you. Not Emily. Not anyone. He exhaled slowly. Sat down at the kitchen table like he used to. Like he thought this would bring something back. It didn't. "You've always been the strong one," he said. I stopped kneading. Looked up. "Strong isn't the same as disposable," I said. That landed. I watched him flinch slightly. He looked down at his hands. Picked at a nail. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "No, Iraplia. But you didn't mean to protect me either." Silence fell again. Not tense. Not hostile. Just honest. He glanced at the stove, the candles, the fresh flowers in the vase by the window. "You've changed things," he said. I nodded. I had to. I was becoming a ghost in my own house. He stood up. Pacing now. "Emily didn't want you in the photo," he said suddenly. "She thought it would throw off the aesthetic. That it was better if just the younger generation was in it. She told me it was no big deal, just for fun." I raised an eyebrow. "And you agreed?" He hesitated. "I didn't think it mattered." "That's the problem, Daniel. It didn't matter to you. But it did to me." He went quiet again. I walked over to the window and opened it slightly. The breeze slipped in. Soft. Cool. The smell of yeast and rosemary swirled in the air. He looked at me, really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. You seem different, he said. I am, I replied. I stopped asking to be seen. He blinked. I didn't know you felt erased. I didn't know either, I said. Until I realized I was the one holding the eraser. He looked at the envelope again. Then at me. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I know I've taken you for granted. I didn't rush to forgive him. I didn't wave it away. I simply nodded. That may be true, but you're not the one who gets to decide if that's enough. He didn't argue. He just stood there watching me like a man trying to memorize something he thought would never change, and now realized he might lose. I picked up the dough, shaped it into a ball, placed it into the proofing bowl. He stepped toward the door. I hope someday you'll read the letter, he said. I didn't answer. He opened the door, sunlight casting a long shadow behind him. He paused and said one last thing. You were always the center of this family. I just didn't see it until you stepped out of the frame. Then he left. And me? I stood in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, music still playing. And I felt no ache. No crack. No collapse. Just space. Room I had carved out with silence, with honesty, with boundaries I never knew I was allowed to have. And for the first time in years, I took a deep breath that belonged to me. I didn't open the letter. Not that day. Not the next. Not even a week later when the wind rattled the windows and the house felt a little lonelier than usual. It sat on the counter, small and harmless looking, like a forgotten envelope from a dentist's office. But it held something heavier. A weight I no longer felt responsible for carrying. I had nothing left to prove, and I was done bleeding from old cuts just to keep other people comfortable. The weeks after Daniel's visit passed quietly, and in that quiet, I started noticing things I'd missed before. How the light filtered through the lace curtain just before noon. How my neighbor's wind chimes made music with no audience. How my own breathing sounded steadier now. There were no grand declarations, no epic turning points. Just a series of small choices that, day by day, rebuilt the version of me I had forgotten. I stopped keeping food in the fridge just in case. I bought myself flowers without needing a reason. I rearranged the furniture not to impress guests, but to make space for the way I actually moved through the room. I even changed my ringtone. It used to be a lullaby, something soft, nostalgic from when Daniel was a baby. Now it was silence. Calls came in, yes, but without fanfare. Without expectation. I started walking again too. Early mornings before the world got loud. I'd pass the same pine tree-lined streets where I used to drive Daniel to school. Sometimes I'd see mothers wrestling toddlers into car seats, backpacks flapping open, cereal still on shirts. And I'd smile. Not out of regret. Not out of missing. But out of knowing I did that. I lived it. I gave it my all. And now I was living something new. One afternoon, I walked into the little community center near the library. I'd passed it for years, always telling myself I'd stop in someday. That day I did. There was a sign-up sheet for a watercolor class. Thursday evenings. Beginner's welcome. I put my name down. I didn't tell anyone. It was mine. The first class I felt ridiculous. My hands shook holding the brush. The paper felt too clean, too blank. But the instructor, a woman with silver braids and a tattoo of a sunflower on her wrist, said, "Just start. The paint will teach you something." And it did. It taught me that messes could be beautiful. That color didn't have to stay in the lines. That a wrong stroke wasn't always a mistake. Sometimes it was just new. I painted a lemon tree that night. The lemons were too bright, the branches crooked. But I loved it. Felt like me, growing in directions no one planned for. The next week I painted my garden. The week after that, a single chair by a window. Empty. Waiting. Not lonely. Just open. Carol from the ER stopped by one Sunday, holding a pie in one hand and a second-hand novel in the other. "Your house feels different," she said, sitting at my kitchen table. "Like it's breathing." "It is," I said. "So am I." We drank tea and talked about things that mattered. Not who said what, not who forgot to call. But poetry, aging, grief, grace, the kind of conversation that doesn't need fixing, just listening. Later that night, I sat on the porch and watched the stars come out one by one. And I thought, this is my life now. No one rushing in. No one asking for anything. Just me and the rhythm of a world I was finally part of on my own terms. I still haven't opened the letter. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Because healing isn't about getting answers. It's about no longer needing them. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel invisible. I don't feel forgotten. I don't feel like the woman behind the swinging kitchen door, waiting for someone to notice. I am the door now. I open and close on my own time. And the light that pours through, it belongs to me. It's funny what stays with you. Not the photo. Not the silence after. Not even the letter still tucked away in a drawer beneath a stack of watercolors and recipe clippings I finally stopped collecting for other people. No, what stays with me is a single moment. A Tuesday morning. The kitchen smelled like toast and lavender dish soap. And I was standing at the sink in my robe, coffee in hand, watching the steam rise from the mug like breath from something newly alive. And I thought, I'm not waiting anymore. Not to be seen. Not to be thanked. Not to be invited into someone else's version of family. I'm not waiting to be asked what I want. I already know. And it's simple. I want peace. I want truth. And I want the kind of love that doesn't require me to disappear in order to receive it. You'd be surprised how much life opens up when you stop contorting yourself to fit into frames you were never meant to be in. When you stop shrinking. When you stop apologizing for your needs, your voice, your presence. The house is quieter now, yes. But it's the good kind of quiet. The kind that hums. That makes room for music and painting, and long walks without destination. Sometimes I dance while I cook. Barefoot, wild-haired, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. No one sees. But that's not the point. I see me. That's enough. Every now and then Daniel texts. Short things. Updates. A photo of the twins, a forwarded meme. A reminder about someone's birthday. I answer when I want to. I don't when I don't. He hasn't asked to visit again. And I haven't offered. Because this version of me, the one who stands tall in her kitchen, who paints crooked lemon trees and smiles at the mess, she doesn't exist for anyone's redemption arc. She's not a lesson. She's not a warning. She's not a footnote in someone else's wedding story. She's the author of her own. Sometimes I sit on the porch and wonder how many women are out there right now, sitting quietly in the back row of their own lives, holding the coats, taking the photos, biting their tongues, invisible, not because they don't shine, but because no one's ever paused long enough to see the light under all that silence. To you, if you're listening, if this story finds you, may you know that your worth does not expire just because someone else failed to recognize it. May you understand that being left out of the photo says nothing about your value and everything about someone else's blindness. May you remember that there is power in the pause, in the no, in the breath you take before you let someone else write your name in pencil again. And may you never wait to be chosen again. You are not an afterthought. You are not background noise. You are not someone's plan B. You are the fire that warmed the house, the hands that held everything together, the heartbeat no one thanked, but everyone depended on. You are not invisible. Not anymore. You are the main character. And the next chapter? It's yours. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe to Invisible No More. Not because you need fixing, but because your story matters too. Share this with someone who's been sitting in the kitchen too long. And if you feel ready, leave a comment. Not for attention, but for connection. We read everyone. You're not alone anymore.